Resourceful Designer, episode 176. Stop competing on prices.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He won an air band competition playing Weird Al Yankovic, Mark DeCote.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for pressing play and joining me today as we discuss ways to improve our design business. Now, in this episode, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't be trying to compete with places like Fiverr or Upwork or 99 Designs or any of those other communities. And I'm also going to share a resource of the week that can help you grow as a designer. So what have I been up to lately? Well, I've been doing a lot of personal work lately. I have a conference I'm going to be attending next week. It's a podcast conference, and as you may or may not know, I am targeting the podcast niche. I have a brand, a website, podcastbranding.co, where I offer podcast artwork and websites at a reasonable price for podcasters. So this conference is rich with my target audience. So I've been designing some postcards, getting my business cards updated, and just getting things ready for the conference. Now, something else I'm up to is actually batch recording. I'm not used to doing this. I usually record one podcast episode per week, but I'm recording a few of them just because I will be away, and then there's going to be vacation time with my wife and I don't want to miss out. So I'm recording a couple of episodes, plus I have an interview that I did recently. So I'm getting a little bit advanced, and I'm going to schedule these to release while I'm away. So that's something different. I'm not used to doing that. But besides that stuff, I'm plugging away at a client website. There's another website that's on hold right now. I received payment for it, but then they asked me, says, it's a really busy time for us. Do you mind if we wait a month or two before supplying the content? And I'm saying, well, you've already given me half the price for the website, and if you're willing to wait, then I guess I am too. Not to mention that with me going to the conference and holiday time, vacation I meant, with my wife and that, it works out for me as well. So I've got that one on hold, but I'm working on another one, as I said. Had to do an update on a logo for a client, a longtime client. They needed some minor tweaks to their logo to help it with some of their marketing material that they're doing. So that was a little interesting. But for the rest of it, I'm just trying to slow down a little bit before the conference. So I don't want to be too gung-ho and then all of a sudden have to take all that time off. So anyways, that's what I've been up to. As I said in this intro, this week's resource of the week is something that can help you grow as a designer. And yes, it's my very own Resourceful Designer community. Let me tell you, since I've started it, it has grown into a very tight-knit group of designers. Everybody partakes at their own level, their own pace, but we are all really getting to know each other. And that's what I love about the community. Not only am I and everybody else learning what our fellow designers do, but we're learning what drives them, what problems they've overcome, and what hurdles they're currently going through. And the help all of us are providing and the help that we're all receiving within the community, I haven't experienced anything like this since I worked at the print shop and I had fellow designers sitting next to me. So there's no worries when we upload a proof of something for people to look at. We're not worried about all the trolls and the negative comments people have. We know that everything in there will be constructive, it'll be valuable, and we take the advice to heart. And I think it's one of the best things I've done since creating this podcast. As I said, it really gives me the feeling that I had back when I was working at the print shop and we had a group of 4 or 5 designers all working close-knit. Well, that's what I feel like with this community. No, we're not always face-to-face, although that is part of the community, is the video chats, and those are amazing. We get together on a regular basis and just discuss design, discuss our businesses. And that communication means so much for somebody who is sitting isolated at home day in, day out, working on their computer. And that's the purpose I built this. It's as much for me as it is for every other member that's in there. So if this sounds like something that would interest you, if you sometimes feel lonely because you're working all by yourself at home and you need people to communicate with, the Resourceful Designer community may be the solution for you. And it doesn't matter what level you're at. There are some very experienced designers in there, as well as some newbies, some people who have just opened up or are in the process of opening up their business, starting their business. So it doesn't matter at what level you are. If you are looking for that camaraderie, that usually can only be found in an agency or a design studio with multiple people, and you're looking for something like that even though you work by yourself from home, then consider joining the Resourceful Designer community. You can find out more by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/community. And now, stop competing on prices. I was talking to a fellow designer recently who is concerned about, competing on prices. He asked me what I do if a client mentions that they can get a logo or whatever design for that matter done for much less than what I charge by going through a place such as, Fiverr or Upwork or 99 Designs or any of those multiple crowdsourced design platforms out there. And he was asking this question, but I also know that he's not the only person with this thought going through their mind. You may have experienced this exact same thing with your own clients, them questioning your prices compared to a discount design source. I know I have. I've been at this a long time, and there's been many times where somebody says, why should I pay your price when I can get something done so much cheaper at one of these other places? Well, the fact of the matter is, competing on prices is a no-win scenario. There's no way that you can compete with the prices these places offer, so don't even think about trying. Well, okay, maybe that's not entirely true. Sure, you could lower your price to their level, but what would that accomplish? You would be selling your services for a pittance and cementing yourself in a rut that would be so difficult to get out of. It's not a sustainable way to run, let alone grow, your design business. Now, I'm going to divide this topic into a two-part series. Next week, I'm going to explain how I personally handle it when a client says, but I can get that cheaper elsewhere. But for today, I want to talk about why competing on prices is a bad and unsustainable way to run your design business. This is what it all comes down to. If you offer rock bottom prices, you will never be taken seriously as a designer, let alone as a business owner. If you try to match pricing found on places like Fiverr or Upwork or 99 Designs or any of those platforms, you'll end up developing an unfavorable reputation that will be extremely difficult to overcome. And you will have a very hard time trying to raise your prices in the future, which you will need to do if you plan on making a decent living at this whole design life. Are you familiar with the concept of a dollar store? There's probably at least one, if not many, around where you live. The premise of a dollar store is that just about everything that they sell is $1. Yeah, over the years, some of these stores have evolved a bit and slowly raised their prices to the point where certain items they sell now cost maybe $2 or $3. But all in all, everyone knows that dollar stores, they're cheap discount stores. Now, dollar stores have built up a reputation for selling cheap merchandise. Not just in price, but in quality as well. After all, how good can a $2 butcher knife or a $1 mini speaker, how good can they really be? And these stores, these dollar stores, they're okay with that reputation. They make no claims that they're anything but what they are. Dollar stores don't make their money by selling quality products. They make their money by selling quantities of products. They make their money $1 at a time. But could you imagine if you go into a dollar store and all of a sudden you see, let's say a crystal wine decanter selling for $50 on the shelf? People that frequent dollar stores would question the validity of that product. I mean, there must be something wrong with the decanter, or it must be subpar in some way for it to be sold at a dollar store. But for $50, nobody would take them seriously, let alone believe that that decanter is worth $50. It's a dollar store after all. And their reputation for selling cheap merchandise for low prices would hurt them in that aspect. Well, that's what happens to your design business when you try to compete by lowering your prices. Nobody will take you seriously, especially if later you try to raise your prices again. So how do you deal with discount designers that are taking clients away from you because of the low prices they're offering? The answer is easy. Stop competing with them. In fact, and this may sound completely weird to you, but when faced with a situation where you feel discounted designers are your direct competition, the best solution is to raise your price higher than what they're charging. You're probably saying, wait, what? How can I raising my prices help this situation? Well, I'm glad you asked. In one of my early podcast episodes, I covered this. It was back in episode 26. I explained how raising your prices can lead to getting better graphic design work and more committed clients. Now, that one was put out a few years ago, so if you don't remember it, you can go back and listen to it at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 26, or find it in whatever platform you listen to podcasts. Just go back to episode 26. But recently, I was listening to Tom Ross's Honest Entrepreneur podcast, episode 87 to be specific. Now, you remember Tom. He's the founder of Design Cuts, and I had him on the show back in episode 155. We talked about supplementing your income by selling design products. You should really check out that episode if you haven't. It was some really good information. Well, in episode 87 of his podcast, Tom mentioned a very good point on that episode of his show. And that is that the biggest issue with pricing low is that the lower your prices are, the more designers you're competing with. He illustrates this with a hypothetical chart that he's actually given me permission to use in my show notes. So if you want to see it, you can visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 176 and see the chart he made up. But since you're listening right now and maybe not in a position to go see the show notes, I'll try to explain it to you here. I want you to think of the various types or the various levels of design clients there are. There are clients that only want to pay $10 for a logo. Now, again, these are all hypothetical, okay? So I'm using round pricing here. So there are clients that only want to pay $10 for a logo. Now, there are clients that, they'll pay $100 for a logo. And there are clients that are looking for, say, a $1,000 logo. Other clients are willing to invest up to $10,000 for a logo. And then you get into big corporations who have budgets of over $100,000 for a logo. And there are a very select few people, companies, organizations, entities out there that are willing and able to spend over $1 million for a logo. And of course, when I say logo, I'm talking brand and the whole bit. I'm not talking just about the logo, but for this purpose, you understand. Now, as you can imagine, this makes up a wide variety of clients, all looking for logos. Now think about the designers that are available out there willing to fulfill these logo design requests. I can tell you, and it's a fact, there are a lot more designers creating $10 logos than there are designers creating $100 logos. And the pattern continues. There are more designers out there creating $100 logos than there are designers creating $1,000 logos. Or there's more designers creating $1,000 logos than there are designers creating $10,000 logos. So the higher the price point, the fewer designers there are offering those prices, meaning the fewer designers there are competing for those clients looking for that level. But the differences between clients versus designers is not proportional. Tom's chart depicts this very nicely, but imagine there are, again, hypothetically, 10 million designers around the globe creating $10 logos. With that amount of competition, it's no wonder it's so cutthroat. But jump ahead a few tiers to, say, the $1,000 logos, there may only be 50,000 designers around the entire globe offering logos for $1,000. Now think about that. Would you rather be competing against 10 million other designers for a client that's willing to pay you $10? Or would you be willing to compete against 50,000 other designers around the world for a client that's willing to pay you $1,000? What about competing with only 10,000 other designers around the entire globe for a client willing to spend $10,000. It's all kind of like the law of supply and demand. Because there are so many designers charging lower prices, a client has more leverage over you. If they're not happy with the way you're working out or what you're offering, no matter how much they like you personally, if they're not happy with anything, they can very easily find a different designer to do the job for the same or possibly even lower price. And since they're paying so little, they're only paying $10 for a logo, they don't really care where they get it, as long as they get it. However, a client with, say, a $1,000 budget or a $10,000 budget, they have much fewer designers to choose from because there's not as many offering logos at those prices. So when they do find a designer, they tend to stick with that designer and get more stuff from them. Do you think the client that pays $10 on Fiverr for a logo necessarily thinks, oh, wow, I'm definitely going to go back to this person? They might, but a good chunk of those clients, the next time they need a logo, they won't go to that one particular person. They'll just go back to Fiverr and start looking or offer another challenge or whatever on whatever platform. There's no commitment. There's no loyalty. But the higher the prices, that loyalty develops. So clients with $1,000 or $10,000 budget will tend to stick with the designer and order more from them. So as you can see, offering low prices not only diminishes your income, but it drastically increases the number of designers that you're competing with. Why would you want to be in that situation? By ignoring all the discount designers and raising your prices, you diminish your competition, you increase your income, and you earn the respect of those clients who hire you. Now, of course, this takes into consideration that you know what you're doing and you're a good designer. But the fact that you are listening to this podcast right now, which means that you are actually dedicated to your craft, you want to grow your skills, you want to grow your design business. The fact that you're listening right now tells me that you're already a good designer, no matter what level you're at. You have what it takes to be a good designer, to increase your skills, and to offer them at the price you deserve. Paraphrasing something Tom said in that podcast episode I mentioned earlier, he said, increasing your prices goes way beyond just earning more money. It makes everything else about running and growing your design business easier. So now you know why you shouldn't be competing on prices, and why, if you find yourself doing so, the answer is to raise your design prices. But unfortunately, your clients don't always understand these same reasons. And that's why next week, I'm going to share how I handle it when clients bring up the option of discount designers and why should they pay more with me. Now, I'll give you a little tease. You may actually be surprised by what I tell my clients. So be sure to tune in for that one. Or better yet, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. That way, you're guaranteed to never miss an episode. That one will show up as soon as it's released. Also, you won't want to miss the episode coming out the week after that one. In episode 178, I'm sharing an interview that I had with a social media expert on the best practices for leveraging social media to promote and grow your design business. And I can tell you in advance, she had some great tips for us that I've already started implementing myself. So you won't want to miss that episode. And the easiest way not to miss an episode is to make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. In the meantime, I would love to know if you've experienced the effect of raising your prices and discovered you suddenly had less competition to deal with and better clients. Leave me a comment for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/176. Now, because I'm batching these episodes in order to release them over the next few weeks, I'm going to forego the question of the week for the next few episodes, but I would still love to be able to answer yours when I'm back on track after vacation and everything. So if you have a question you would like me to answer in a future episode of the podcast, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and submit your question. I love answering listener questions, but I know for a fact that my mailbox is currently empty, actually. I don't have a single question in there. The last couple of weeks, I've actually pulled them out of the Facebook group, which is great, but I always love it when they ask the questions directly to me. So please, if you have one, now's the time to submit it because you know that I'm going to get to it as soon as I start answering the questions again in a couple of weeks. So once again, that's resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback to submit yours. So if you found this topic valuable and maybe you're planning on tuning in next week, or social media is your thing and you're looking forward to that interview that I mentioned, if you find all this stuff valuable, then other designers will as well. So please, if you have any friends in the design space, let them know about Resourceful Designer. Help me grow this community. Tell them that the podcast can be found on Spotify, on Pandora, on iHeartRadio, as well as any podcast app, including on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, any of those platforms. And if they're still not sure, they can download the apps. Just search for Resourceful Designer in either the iOS store or the Android store. Download the apps and all the episodes can be found there. So that's it for me this week. Tune in next week for part 2 of this series on dealing with discount designers. Until then, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your graphic design business and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.